So we're going to get started. We're going to highlight some of the meta research that's been being done in the NYU research community itself. And so up first, I want to welcome to the stage Rémi Thériault, who's a postdoc at the Center for Conflict and Cooperation in the Department of Psychology at NYU.
All right. Hello, everyone. So I'm going to start right now. So I'm the Department of Psychology at the Center for Conflict and Cooperation, but my interest in meta research goes back many years. I've been thinking about the replication crisis in open science and how we can deal with sort of all the issues about science and how we can do it better. And part of this motivation led to getting involved in this project that aims to kind of track the representation of global authors across the world and across different continents. So in 2008, psychologist Jeffrey Arnett published a paper in American Psychologist, one of the most influential journals in psychology, in which he was showing that most of modern Western psychology revolves around the United States. And so not only for our samples, which are often American samples, but also in terms of who's doing the research. Okay, so in terms of sample, first of all, we have some kind of problem because we're trying to make universal claims about the nature of psychology with a capital P. And perhaps that's not accurate because we don't actually have the data to back it up, to make broad claims that apply to humanity as a whole. In some sense, our original efforts in that sense maybe translated somewhat of a lack of intellectual humility. That's something we're also interested in at the Center for Conflict and Cooperation. In fact, if you're interested, we just published a psychological scale about intellectual humility, and if you email me, I'll send it to you if you're interested. Okay, and so there's a problem of how broadly our claims apply, generalizability, and in terms of who's doing the research, there's possibly a lot of voices and perspectives that we're missing out on about psychology because those people across the world don't have the same opportunities to publish in those high impact factor journals and get involved with the international community. In fact, you could say that the fact that most research is being done in the US, for example, suggests that perhaps there's some sort of biases in what kind of research questions we ask, because we ask questions that are relevant to us and to what we know, and also in terms of the paradigms that we use and the ways in which we try to answer those questions. So Arnett in his paper showed a very interesting figure showcasing sort of the proportion of first authors on papers from 6 major psychology journals from the APA, the American Psychological Association. And he was showing that over the years 1988 to 2007, on average between 70 and 80% of first authors were from the United States. So again, showing a large dominance of the US and the science in the field of psychology for those prestigious journals. And he and his team did an update in 2021 in which they added data for 2 extra years, 2014 and 2018. And we kind of see a pattern, a downward trend in those data. So it seems like, okay, there's a slow progress in terms of representation, in terms of diversity of authorship. So now we're closer to about 60%. Now, one of the problems of the methods and the ways that they've used is that it was extremely time consuming because they had to fetch the metadata from each paper individually from each journal, and it was simply not scalable to many journals and many years. So my goal was to find a way that we could automate this process so we could have all the years that we wanted and possibly many more journals. But the first step was trying to see if we could replicate this figure with the new methodology that I'm going to explain to you shortly. So what you see here is sort of a replication of the previous figures, but for data for every year since 1988 to 2025, for the main journals. And what we see is that it, for the most part, kind of replicates those earlier findings, suggesting that our approach is valid. So how do we get this data? The first thing is that we wanted to look for a database that we could communicate with to extract metadata. So we did start with PubMed. Now, the thing about PubMed is that it's mostly focused on the medical sciences and a lot less for social sciences. So turns out there's a lot of journals that are simply not indexed on PubMed. And even for journals that are indexed, sometimes a lot of papers are missing, or complete years are missing. So we were working with data that was very difficult to curate and also to kind of generalize from. But we found this very promising database called OpenAlex. That's in reference to the large library Alexandria that caught fire, and a lot of knowledge was lost and this tragedy. But this database is made for researchers. So meta researchers here, take note, OpenAlex is really the platform to access metadata about papers and authors and journals and so on. And it has a free API that allows you to communicate and extract all the information that you have. They're also working on an update that's going to add 100,000 more journals. And the benefit is that it also includes journals from the global south that are usually not indexed, have less visibility, allowing us to have a much more exhaustive, comprehensive picture of what is happening in science. Now, there are a lot of steps between using the data, having the data, and then translating that into text and images that the public can understand. So to address this problem, I created and published our package called Pub Dashboard and for publication dashboard. And the goal of this package is to make it very easy for you as a user to communicate with OpenAlex and then automatically create tables that summarize the data, publication ready tables and figures that you can include in manuscripts, or that you can even integrate in a data visualization dashboard. So this is what the next step look like. This is the missing majority and behavioral science dashboard. Very proud of it. Took a lot of hours to do this. But you can actually take a photo of this if you like. There's the URL there, but you can also find it on Google by typing missing majority dashboard. And the goal of this, again, is to track sort of in real time the representation of first authors and behavioral science, in this case, combining psychology and economics. Okay, and you have different tabs at the top. You can look for individual disciplines, individual fields. And on the right, on the top right, you can already see some aggregate data. You can see that in behavioral science, only 4% of papers come from Latin America and Africa. 54% actually comes from the US, from a single country that's nowhere representing the world population, as you can imagine. And 87% comes from the so-called global north through North America and Europe. Now there are questions, how do we select those journals? The first step was just starting from where the Arnold papers left us, with the 6 major APA journals that we mentioned before, such as developmental psychology, child development, psychological science, GPSP, and so on. But then we wanted to expand and look at other major influential journals in the field, and we reached out to other experts and colleagues to slowly grow our database. Now that is a dynamic work. We want to include a lot more journals in the future, and for economics as well. So the American Economic Review and so on. We actually have 34 journals for economics. And now looking at some of this data, we can see here, taking only the field of psychology, that on this waffle chart, each square represents 1% of the data. You can see North America has about 70%, and Africa and Latin America less than 0.5% each. If you're looking at the individual countries, you can see that the US is the major actor here, along with Canada and the UK, where countries where English is the main language. Looking over time, you can see there's a slight reduction over time of North America, and that's the same kind of pattern reflected for the individual countries. These data have been published in a paper called A Manifesto for Globally Diverse, Equitable, Inclusive Open Science and Communication Psychology. You're very welcome to have a look at it. Now, I did want to have a word about generalizability. So, for example, now you can see it only includes psychology and economics, but we're hoping to include a lot more fields in the future and a lot more journals. So this is a work in progress. There are logistical issues with the large amount of data that we are dealing with, but it should be easily scalable and reusable by people. The whole point of this project was to make it so anybody could reuse the same methodology, the open source R package, and the instructions that we left, and simply changing the names of the journals that you're interested in, and you could replicate this dashboard pretty easily. And we're also always looking for improvement. We have a GitHub repository in which we're welcoming suggestions for improvement and selections of journals. Lastly, there are some limitations to this dashboard that we're aware of and that we're trying to work on. So for example, the data is not per capita yet, but we can imagine larger countries with more people probably would be expected to publish more. So we're working on that. There's also the problem of using only English-speaking journals, but in many countries where English is not the native language, such as my home place in Quebec, the French-speaking region of Canada, we publish a lot in French journals, and that's true also in Latin America, where you publish in Spanish or Portuguese and so on. But in the future, we want to also include those non-English speaking journals to have a better picture of what is happening. Now, there are missing data in this dashboard that we're slowly curating as well, but I'm kind of the only person working on all the programming, so it takes time. Also, as a full-time postdoc fellow on the job market for faculty positions. But this is my evening and weekend hobby, you could say. And the problem with the missing data is that it's probably not random, because sometimes we can struggle to identify the region from some universities that are like poorly indexed in the databases that we have, mostly coming from the global south. So maybe it misrepresent the misrepresentation to some extent. And finally, the norms of authorship are not the same across all fields. So for example, psychology first authorship is usually the lead author. However, in economics and other fields, that's not always the case. Sometimes it's just alphabetical order and so on. So now we're working on defining a new index that will be more representative and truthful of what's actually going on with authorship. So by including all of the authors, then we're going to get a better picture of what's actually going on in different fields. Finally, I want to thank my collaborator, Patrick Forscher, at the Busara Center for Behavioral Economics, who was the sponsor of this project. So this was kind of Patrick's vision in the beginning, and then I joined the project and kind of made it a reality with my programming skills and my passion for meta research. So thank you very much.